We're delighted to have you all here. And yes, we are recording this part, so it'll be available to you and others who want to listen to some of it later. Um, we're aware that this is a sensitive topic and there are a lot of emotions around it. So I'm going to invite all of us to take good care of ourselves and each other in this conversation. Our goal tonight is not necessarily to be political, but to be informative. And to that end, if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to put them in the chat. If you want to address your question directly to me as the moderator, you can do that through the chat function, or you can just address it to everyone, whichever way you prefer. And we thought we would record this first part and then leave 15 to 20 minutes at the end where we turn the recording off in case there's some questions or concerns or things that people want to voice that they don't particularly want recorded, so that you'll have that option later. So again, thank you for being here, and I am going to turn this over to our panelists. We have three wonderful panelists, and I have asked them to introduce themselves, to tell us a little bit about who they are and what context they're working in right now, and then we'll go from there right into the conversation. So panelists, whichever one of you wants to start, feel free.
I'll
Hey,
start.
I'll be brave. Kristina and I. Go ahead, Kristina.
Okay. I'm Kristina Storck. I am an OBGYN in Nashville, Tennessee. I stopped doing my obstetrics practice about a year ago, so I'm now just doing gynecology. So I'm coming to you all from an OBGYN perspective and background. I'm in private practice.
Thank you, Kristina. Appreciate it. Orisha?
And I'm Dr. Orisha Bowers. I'm the Executive Director of the National Harm Reduction Coalition. I spent the first 15 to 18 years in reproductive health, right, and justice, and now work in harm reduction, which is a adjacent movement to reproductive health, right, and justice, but is concerned about people being able to self-determine and meeting people where they are to make the plans and decisions that they need to make to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Orisha. Appreciate it. And Hope?
Hi, everyone. My name's Hope. I am a recent graduate of a clinical mental health counseling program. So I'm coming from more of the kind of therapy counseling perspective. Prior to that work, I also worked in reproductive health care for about 6 years. So I have, I guess, kind of a toe in both sides of the conversation that we're having tonight. But right now I'm working clinically with mostly college age students. And so reproductive health care and autonomy and access is very important to the population that I serve as well. Oh, and I'm in Knoxville. So all across the state tonight.
Yeah, we have Orisha's in Memphis and Hope is in Knoxville and Kristina's here in Nashville. So we are well represented. So again, thank all three of you so much for being here. And just to sort of preview the evening for those of you joining us, we're going to cover certain particular areas and then the conversation may wander off from there to other things. But we certainly want to talk about the impact of the Dobbs decision on the mental health of our clients, patients broadly defined. So that would certainly include the impact on women and other individuals who can become pregnant, but also on healthcare providers, on family members of people who can become pregnant. So broadly defined, what's the impact on clients' mental health? And then we want to spend some time talking about ethical and legal responsibilities for practitioners in mental health fields. how to provide accurate information that encourages self-determination for the clients, how to deal with issues around confidentiality and secure communication, issues that we need to talk about all the time, but that take on a whole nother level of importance with this decision, and the possibility of values conflicts that can come up between client and practitioner, and how we handle those kinds of potential conflicts in our roles. And then maybe we'll have some time to talk a little bit about advocacy, since most of our professional organizations encourage advocacy of whatever kind. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And I want to mention that even though we're talking about ethical and legal issues, we do not have a lawyer here tonight. And that was not from a lack of trying. But there seem to be two things going on. One, this is a very recent decision, and people are still trying to figure out how to navigate the law. And also, we have gotten feedback from some lawyers that we have contacted that basically says they're not ready to discuss this. They don't want to talk about this. So I'm going to be trying to, along with the panelists, provide some legal information, not because I'm a lawyer, but legal information provided through the American Psychological Association. So we can reflect on that. And for those of you, I think most of you know me, but for those of you who don't, I'm Linda Manning, and I'm the current chair of NPI and chair of the Social Justice Committee. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. So let's start out with introductions. Shall we go alphabetically and start with Hope? You kind of did that. You've kind of introduced yourselves a little. Yeah, all right. So how about impact on clients? What do you all see or notice in terms of the impact on the mental health of the populations you serve?
Well, I'll jump in. So our organization helps and assists individuals who use drugs, who may have the ability to parent. We see a lot of individuals who are already, for whatever reason, utilizing substances and alcohol. And so it can further exacerbate the use and push folks into chaotic use. I've seen folks fall deeper into their depressed state because of COVID and the inability to connect with mental health care or mental health providers, whether it's due to a lack of access to telehealth or access to insurance, depending upon what's going on with the individual. But more than anything, just the social isolation that people may be experiencing in an unintended or unexpected pregnancy can exacerbate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to kind of add to those impacts, I think that something I see with a lot of my clients in the community college setting here in East Tennessee, we're pretty rurally located. And so I would say a pretty significant portion of my caseload is emerging adults, a lot of first generation college students that are working very hard to kind of do something different than maybe they have seen in their family systems before. And I think that connects to the Southern culture of, expectations around parenthood and family planning and when that's supposed to happen and how it's supposed to happen. So when I think about the impacts of this decision, a lot of that like stigma comes to mind, but then also the longer term impacts of decisions that people are trying to make about their life's trajectory and their life plans and that kind of emerging adulthood stage.
I would say for me in my patient population, I've seen a lot of fear. I've had patients who have come in with miscarriages in progress, fearful that they wouldn't get the care that they need because of this decision. So there's a lot of misinformation and I think misunderstanding about the law. I've had an unusual spike in requests for longer term contraception, IUDs. I've had girls who have never been sexually active, have no plans to be sexually active, coming in for IUDs. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, but it's coming from fear of this decision. It's not sort of organic. I've had lots of calls from parents. What should my daughter do? She's leaving for college. And then I didn't mention this in the introduction, but I also work, St. Thomas Midtown has a GYN ER. And so I also do some shifts there and serving that population. And there's a lot of fear. That's what I see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety around this for folks. Yeah. What about clients or people you all may serve who, again, are not women or other people who can get pregnant? Do you hear much of this from family members, from Kristina, you mentioned parents, but how about other physicians who might be impacted by this law, or healthcare providers in general? Any of that sort of thing that you're noticing?
As a member of the harm reduction community, many of our syringe service programs and harm reduction programs in the community have increased their dissemination of pregnancy prevention resources, as well as we have a resource called the Pregnancy Toolkit for people who use drugs, and it is a resource that was curated by folks at ACOG and some other places, as well as some of our team. But we see a real uptick in the dissemination of condoms and Plan B and other resources that, were typically available with your reproductive health service providers. And because some of the places are closed or don't have the same access to resources to be able to disseminate those tools for folks, that is something that I see, specific to syringe service programs, a uptick in dissemination of reproductive health resources.
Okay, so they're sort of stepping up to take over some of, fill that gap that's left.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks. So let's talk about the law and what it says and what it doesn't say. So anybody want to, I think that obviously a part of our role as mental health providers is helping people with self-determination, right? Not to tell people what to do, but to help them make decisions for themselves. And part of that is making sure that they have accurate information to work with. So anybody want to jump in and just describe what the law says and what it doesn't?
I mean, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Basically, this law there are no exemptions from this law. I mean, I think that's the most important thing to understand. There are no exemptions for anything, rape, incest. What there is something called affirmative defense, which means that the provider who provides the service, who is committing a felony by this law, when providing that service, can use an affirmative defense after they're charged, which basically says, yes, I did this, but it is justified because it was for the to preserve the life of the mother, or to preserve bodily function, or prevent harm for the mother, basically. Interestingly, and this is where it's interesting for you all, is mental health is not considered in the affirmative defense. So it is not defensible to provide that service for somebody for mental health indication.
Or even for suicide prevention.
Correct.
example, right?
Correct, which is horrible, in my opinion. But anyway, so it very specifically carves that out.
Mhm. And when you say Class C felony, that's 3 to 15 years in jail, and is it $10,000 fine? Yeah.
That's right.
So
Mhm.
it's a serious
Loss
offense,
of medical license.
loss of medical license.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And this applies in Tennessee not only to surgical abortion but also to medical abortion.
Correct.
Providing or prescribing the pills for abortion.
Correct.
It's also illegal in this state. That's not true everywhere, but it is here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything else about the law itself? Are there any questions about the law? Just one other piece of information. Tennessee also has enshrined this in the state constitution. So at this point, without a constitutional amendment, the law cannot be changed, right, in Tennessee. So given all of that, what does this mean about our obligation to avoid or minimize harm for people and to respect the rights of individuals to privacy, confidentiality, and self-determination? Any thoughts on any of that?
Sorry, I got distracted by the question in the chat and was trying to listen to both at
Oh,
once.
thank you. I'm glad that you told me there's a question in the chat. Okay, thank you. Let me start with that, Hope. If the question is, if we point clients to out-of-state providers, do we have liability as well? Great question. My understanding, and once again, I am not a lawyer. So this information that I am offering I'm a psychologist, so this comes from APA, American Psychological Association. And my understanding is that since Tennessee does not have a clause about aiding and abetting an abortion, we can provide resources, and we are safer if we provide general websites where a person can gather information rather than a referral to a specific state or a specific provider or a specific location. So things like Planned Parenthood has a website that patients can go to, fill in where they are, and get information about the nearest states that have legal abortion. And abortionfinder.org also has that kind of information. So providing those websites seems at this moment, this is evolving, but at this moment to be a safe thing for us to do.
I raised my hand because that is my understanding of the answer to that question as well. Just the caution though that, as you are researching and looking up information to provide general information, to provide that you be familiar somewhat with the list, or people on the list or the resource that you're providing, because there are many anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers that are also still allowed to give false or inaccurate information to individuals seeking an abortion. And many of them name their facilities after abortion providers' names, or purchase the rights on, I think it's the rights on Google, to be able to have their stuff pop up under phone numbers that may have gone out. They're now crisis pregnancy centers. And it's not to say that, crisis pregnancy centers are not a resource to people who want to have who want to parent, but for a person who is specifically seeking an abortion, just be mindful of just Googling something and giving people information, because you wouldn't want to send them to a place that is trying to persuade them to parent if they are in fact seeking an abortion.
Right. We don't want to send them to a place that is not going to be all about self-determination, or that is going to provide inaccurate information. And I read somewhere that over 40% of crisis pregnancy centers provide misinformation, extreme misinformation, like abortion increases the risk of breast cancer, which is absolutely not true, those kinds of things. So thank you for that, Orisha. That's very important.
And that it increases depression. That's another biggie,
Right.
just for this particular audience to know.
Right. Another biggie and another false one. And for those of you who are not familiar with the research, again, APA has a lot of resources on the research that's been done over multiple years and thousands of women, particularly a study called the Turnaway Study that confirms that there is not increased difficulty with mental health for people who want an abortion and have an abortion. If they didn't want an abortion and are pressured into it, obviously that's a very different thing. But when it is, when they want an abortion, there's not significant mental health negative consequences. And in fact, there are mental health consequences, negative consequences for people who want an abortion and get turned away. And that study, again, it's if you just Google Turnaway Study, it'll give you all the data, but it was over 1,000 women and across 21 states. Okay. Let's see, are there other things about the law that anyone wants to say in terms of, or accurate information? And I'm going to mention those two places again that I would trust to provide information to women, and that's Abortion Finder, all small letters, .org, and PlannedParenthood.org. And the Planned Parenthood of Middle Tennessee and Mississippi, I guess it's now Tennessee and Mississippi, now have patient navigators that will work one-on-one with patients on the phone in terms of helping them to find resources, not just where abortion is legal, but if they need help with finances, etc. That service is available. Okay. One other thing about that is, for those of you who have licenses in more than one state, to be aware, you need to know the law not just in Tennessee, but also in the other state where you are practicing. And so if you're a member of, for those who are psychologists, if you're a member of SIPAC and doing telehealth across state lines, you need to be aware of the law in the other, the law where the licensed in Tennessee and Texas. So Texas does have the aid and abet clause in their license, in their law, and so I have to be aware of that if I'm working with clients in Texas. Okay. So about confidentiality and secure communication, thoughts, around how we work with clients around that kind of information and what they are doing to protect their own information in terms of texting and email, and how we protect their information in notes. I'm just going to open up that topic and see if any of you have comments on that before we move along. Panelists.
Sorry to be the one that's speaking on everything. I was trying to hold back to see if others had things. Many there's a channel called Signal that a lot of folks in the harm reduction spaces use. Many choose not to use Zoom or Google Hangouts and some of those other platforms, because they're monitored sometimes, or not quite as safe and secure. But Signal is a good resource for folks. And then to send information, I've seen a lot of folks using Slack or Basecamp.
Yeah, Signal is particularly for texting. Is that right, Orisha? Yeah. So if you text with your clients, right, this here is an option. If they're willing to join Signal and you join Signal, and you set it to erase the messages in a certain period of time, that protects some of their confidentiality that is not protected on a regular cell phone. For emails, there are programs like Virtu, VIRTU, which is also encrypted and HIPAA compliant for use with emails with clients. I'm sure there are others. That's just one I know about. So if anybody else knows of others, please speak up. Here is a comment from a participant. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org, has all kinds of resources for digital security. I agree. Wonderful one to have.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky topic in terms of notes, because you want to be accurate in your documentation, and obviously you need it for your record of what was discussed and all that, but you do have to be a little bit sensitive about what if this is reviewed, what if so that is that's a new frontier. We haven't really had that issue pre-Dobbs, at least obviously regarding this issue. So where it comes up for us is sort of when we do have to make that decision for that procedure, we have to really document all our reasons why. But I get nervous, I have patients that use all kinds of different apps for tracking their period, and I know that's been a source of concern. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I want to think that people aren't going to be data mining for stuff like that, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's my optimistic view.
Right.
Hopefully that's not what happens.
And in fact, we know that I'm muted. We know that data mining has taken place in some
Yes.
yeah, and been used for prosecution. So to be aware of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's probably, that comes up, at least for me, in other issues. I have patients who are getting divorced and, have other relationships and need to come in for sexually transmitted infection screening. And then how do I document that? And, how do I document some of those discussions? So, we definitely, I think in women's health, we definitely have some sensitive topics that come up. So that's not new. But I think but this is, but not topics that were potential felonies either. So, that's a whole new ball game.
Right.
Yeah, I think kind of similarly in the mental health field, there are certainly times when we all have to use some discernment in the details that we include in our notes. And so I guess just to normalize a little bit that if this feels extra scary because of, the felony risk of it all, that's very fair. And also we use this type of discernment all the time. And for example, I have clients who will threaten to harm other people, but they're not threatening to harm someone else in a clinically significant, this is a discernment piece that we already have to use. And so I think that we can extend those same kind of ethical principles and thought processes, even though this topic does carry a different kind of political and legal weight.
Exactly. I'm putting in the chat, and I apologize because I'm a slow typer, a website from Health and Human Services, HIPAA related, um, that talks about some of these things and some of the possibilities you can use with cell phones and tablets and so on. There we go. Um, so also just to let you know that in terms of notes, certainly we need those questions about, you know, what is it appropriate to put in notes and what is not appropriate to put in notes, and that's a decision we make every day. And just so you know, the Office of Civil Rights has confirmed that the HIPAA privacy rule would not permit disclosure of patient information related to abortion under mandatory child abuse or duty to warn reporting. That's been a concern that's come up. And a way that some people in some states, not in Tennessee, have tried to get to notes. But the Office of Civil Rights through Health and Human Services has said that you cannot do that because the HIPAA privacy rule is a federal law that trumps the state law. Okay. And for those who are psychologists, APA has gone even further and said that when a conflict arises, it allows a psychologist to not follow the law. They have to follow the ethical code, and they consider the right to abortion a human right under their ethical code. So just for information, that's not true for all the professional organizations, but it is for psychologists. Any other questions around any of that? Okay. So let's talk some about value conflicts. What it's like for us as individuals when our values differ from our client values, and how to navigate some of that, and how to take care of yourself through any of it. So panelists, anything you want to say about that? Any questions from the group?
I would jump in and say that, again, like making space for this being a very sensitive and kind of layered issue for all of us. That does not take away our responsibility as clinicians, as helpers in our various professions to kind of bear the burden of bringing up these topics, if that feels clinically appropriate. And I think that right now, that looks like a real openness to whatever opinions or beliefs the client might hold around this issue. I guess I just hope to empower us to still take on that role of broaching tough topics and tough conversations. I think that it's a very this topic being particularly heavy and personal does not take away that responsibility that we hold, to respect our position of power in a client dynamic, and kind of do the scary thing first and create a space where our clients can meet us with that same frankness and openness as best they can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say for me, it comes up, I mean, even prior to this, with all kinds of decisions, with pregnancy care, and I look at it like my role as an educator. So for me, it kind of doesn't really matter what my belief system is. My role is to make sure the information that the patient is getting is accurate, but really sort of empowering them to make the decision that feels right for them. Mm-hmm. And kind of removing that not judgment, but to me, it doesn't matter what I think or what my stance is. I mean, I just, I want to be able to give people the right information to make those decisions. I find in lots of things, people are making decisions with misinformation.
Yeah.
And so the most important thing is just making sure they really know all of the options and all of the resources for both, decisions. And because sometimes I find people, again, it kind of all goes back to fear and, misinformation. We make lots of decisions, but we don't really have all the right tools.
And there is a lot of misinformation out there. Yeah. Yeah.
For me as a person, I mean, I've been doing harm reduction for, more than 20 years. And so I get the privilege of working in a profession that aligns with my values, that an individual is an expert on their own life. And no one can teach you about you better than you. To Kristina's point, I think people need to be armed with all of the information, accurate information, but also all of the options that are available to them, as well as access to resources. But people need to be liberated from living under other folks' judgment about their decisions, but self-authorized to act as an agent and a expert on their own choices. So for me, I rarely find places where my values are misaligned with people, because I mean, in the most simple essence of harm reduction, it truly is about that person being the agent of change and deciding when to change and if change is needed, in their life. So, I believe that that's all of our job as helpers and caregivers and stewards of resources in the community, is to partner with people in their decision making. And if there is a misalignment of values, be respectful enough to pull yourself back and find someone who can get them what they need if that person is not you. I think we have to also be self-aware when we do find those moments where there's a values clash, that we have enough humility to step back and let somebody else help that person get to where they're trying to go in life.
I think that's so well said.
I agree. Absolutely.
I think too, the other piece is sort of the aftermath of that decision. So whatever that decision ends up being, continuing to be supportive, even if it doesn't align for you personally. I mean, I think a lot of these patients and clients, they look to you. You might be maybe you're the only person who supports them in that decision. And so you kind of become maybe more important than you even thought you were, in providing that support.
Right. Agreed. The other thing to just throw in there, because this is such a sensitive topic, many of us have a lot of feelings around it, right? We as practitioners are not immune to having our own feelings about the topic. And to remember that we can rely on supervision and consultation to process our feelings, right? We don't obviously do that with our clients, but we need to do it somewhere. That's really helpful in order to be able to have the humility that Orisha is talking about, and to know when we need to step back, or how to show up in a way that is truly supportive for clients and not just about our own feelings or issues around the topic. So just putting in a plug for consultation and supervision, which we can all use at different times. All right, I'd love to hear some questions from the audience. What are your concerns or questions or uncertainties about this topic?
Is it okay if we just unmute and ask questions, or would you prefer we type them?
No, go right ahead, Joe.
So I guess for me, because I'm a male clinician, I don't have the same perspective that y'all would have. So what is the most effective way that I can support somebody who is seeking, reproductive services or abortion services as, a male clinician?
What a great question. Thank you for that. Any of you panelists or anyone else want to give an answer to Joe's question?
Thank you, Joe, for your bravery. It's hard to go first, man. It's hard to go first. Again, I would say, in my days of doing referrals, abortion care referrals, I just tried to stay knowledgeable about the information and have, as much accurate information as I could share. I'll give you a reframe. Although you identify as a male, pregnancies can be just as unexpected for a male as they can for a female or a person who identifies as a person who can give birth. So, sometimes you have to think about, what would you say to a guy who was asking for their information? You would just give him the information, so think of it like that in terms of preparing for the referral itself. Just have as much information as you can, try to be as comfortable as you can with sharing it, no matter who the person is.
Anyone else have a suggestion?
I think that in my mind, that would be another area where just being very kind of I guess genuine with the client in that moment, if it does feel like something that's out of your element based on those kind of identity differences, like I could see that being a particularly good time to say, like, I don't have this information off the top of my head right now, or maybe I don't know, but I do know some places we can look together, and kind of just being an active, like walking alongside the client as they're kind of, grappling with either new information about like their health or new medical information, or are trying to make a decision or trying to access the decision that they would like to make. Just kind of being actively present and normalizing that, like, this is the thing that a lot of people aren't experts on until they find themselves needing to be. So an opportunity to kind of affirm and normalize there, I think.
And I actually think, Joe, that the affirmation of self-determination can be even more powerful in some ways coming from a man in this situation. So to keep that possibility in mind as well. Yeah. That, it's not a decision you have to make, but you affirm the person's right to make their own decision. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all for that. Just the, orientation towards preparing myself, getting knowledge and being aware and all that. So appreciate it.
Bad.
I think it's really difficult in this time to reassure women that they have that autonomy. I mean, it certainly doesn't feel like women have autonomy right now. And I think that is what I find is a challenge is, that, I mean, when the government makes laws about what you can and can't do, it's very difficult to feel like you have that power, and that it's okay, and honestly, that it's okay to have that power or have that choice. I mean, I find a lot of women struggle with that.
Yeah, because we're getting a very different message, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Other questions? Oh, I see something down here. What might be resources for assisting people financially who are seeking abortion services? So any of the panelists have a comment on that? Resources for assisting financially, because clearly now we have the expense of travel, taking time off work, etc., to add to the cost of any procedure itself. Child care for other children, while traveling for care, etc. So, comments on help that way.
I think there are a lot of local funds set up. I know in East Tennessee, in this region, one of the main referrals is the Mountain Access Brigade, which you can find online. Planned Parenthood is going to be a great resource there to connect to funds. And then I would also mention NAF, the National Abortion Federation. They have they connect and fund procedures and travel and are very knowledgeable about different state restrictions and laws. That's their whole thing that they do. So they're a great national organization that you can direct clients to. That it sounds like, Linda, that would also be right now a fairly legally preferred option to send to a national organization.
Yes, agreed. We already mentioned that Planned Parenthood has navigators available who help clients seeking services, not just with the procedure, where to find a procedure, but with finances as well. And there are other national groups like the Bridget Alliance that helps people with funds. Valerie put one in the chat. Valerie, you said that okay, I'm behind on things here. Valerie mentioned abortioncaretennessee.org, but you said this is not direct to patients, but via clinics. So they don't give funds to the patients, but they give funds to the clinic. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's how they describe it
Okay.
on the website. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Orisha is mentioning that there may be harm reduction partners underground that have rapid response resources. And then here's a question. In Tennessee, there is a restrictive measure in place for schools in regard to sex education. Teachers are not required to teach sex education. If they do, schools are only allowed to teach abstinence only. As a school-based therapist in a rural high school outside of Nashville, I am technically not allowed to discuss anything with clients besides abstinence. I struggle with how to balance the rules while at the same time supporting my clients with very real concerns that come along with sexual activity, including access to birth control, fears of possible pregnancy, etc. Suggestions, thoughts for supporting adolescents during this time. Whew. Yeah.
I mean, my suggestion would be to refer them to an OBGYN who sees adolescents. I believe in the state of Tennessee, you don't have to have parental consent for contraception. So even though as a school-based provider, you can't provide that information, as a medical provider, I absolutely can. So that would be my suggestion.
Great suggestion. Yeah.
Another suggestion could be, again, I'm always about community, collaborating with other community partners that are not confined by some of the restrictions. I mean, it's still a slippery slope, but in places where it's abstinence only, you can collaborate with a program that's abstinence based. And of course, you can always educate the parents. That's another way to walk the chalk line, is let it be a parental engagement activity, and whatever parents ask you, you can answer. It's just kids that you can't answer questions. Oh,
Great. And I noticed, Orisha, you put another resource in here for financial resources. So y'all check that out in the chat as well. Yeah, thank you for that. Did that help with the abstinence only education question? At least some thoughts on that. Yeah. Can't hear you. You're not muted, so you may just not have your microphone turned up.
I don't know what to do there.
Here, now I can hear you.
Oh, that did help. Thank you. Thanks for the suggestions.
Okay, good, great. Other questions?
I have a question. We've talked and heard about all the misinformation, just plain medical misinformation around abortion. A challenge that I find sometimes is that individuals won't believe accurate information. I mean, we have this all across the political spectrum of whole groups who believe that the current president fraudulently won this election in the face of all kinds of accurate information. I don't know what to do about that. Are there particular resources that y'all can suggest that some might find more credible rather than just saying, well, that side of the spectrum is going to say this?
It's a great question because that side of the spectrum is not going to like Planned Parenthood as a resource.
Right, right.
Right. Any thoughts on that, panelists or anyone else? Other resources that perhaps those who are more on the conservative end of things might find more believable?
About abortion specifically. Yeah, I mean, I think ACOG, which is American College of OBGYN, has, that's our governing body in the medical field of obstetrics and gynecology. So I think, and they have a lot of patient-based information. I mean, they have information for clinicians, but they also have a patient side, and they have produced a lot of material regarding this issue. So that might be more palatable for people. It's just acog.org, acog.org. So I think that might be good. I'm trying to think. I haven't looked at Up to Date recently, but they, from just a pure medical perspective, they typically have pretty evidence-based information. But ACOG would be definitely one I would refer them to.
Great idea. And along those same lines, I've heard a lot that sometimes people, if they have a relationship with their physician or their healthcare provider, they're more likely to believe that person or resources that that person provides. So that might be helpful too. Yeah.
I was going to say just one more thought in terms of like organizations or publications to look at would be like based on the client demographic. Like I think that like there's information at all of the federal levels around welfare and like the impacts of being able to access reproductive health care or not for all different age groups. So I would be curious if you couldn't find just more associations kind of similar to ACOG of just this is like the national federal governing body of this group or this issue, whether that's compelling to everybody, who knows, but just an option for something else to look for.
Right. Thank you. And Orisha just put the PG-13 players, which is a great group. You want to say some things about that, Orisha, into the chat?
Yes. I put the link to the PG-13 players at Planned Parenthood. This is the youth peer educators program at Planned Parenthood for youth ages 13 and up. And they, do share evidence-based information, but they do it in the form of theater and it's, engaging for young people who are looking for an alternative to a sort of school type of model. They use artistic approach. And then there's also the Sexperts, which is basically a version of the PG-13 players for college age students that comes out of the Planned Parenthood of North Mississippi, Tennessee and North Mississippi, which is good for young people.
Yeah, they're more open to their peers oftentimes, right? Yeah. All right, other questions? So I have one for you, Kristina. I have read lately about, and I don't wonder if you've come across this. I know it is not your area of specialization, but I have read about um, women of reproductive age being denied access to certain medications because they might produce an abortion. And one example that was given was methotrexate. Thank
Mhm.
you. Which is
Yes.
used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, for example. Could you speak
Correct.
to that issue?
Yeah. So that my understanding is that's definitely been a problem in the Memphis area. We've had a little bit of that in Nashville. Where that's coming from are pharmacists are concerned that they will dispense the medication, and then if the medication is subsequently used for an abortion, they could be found liable. And under the current law, I believe they could. Now, the extent to which, a prosecuting attorney or whatever is going to go for that, I don't know. But, and the problem is that's a theoretical. So there are lots of women who have lupus, for example, or, any number of autoimmune conditions that are having trouble with access to medication. I personally often use a medication called Cytotec to help alleviate some of the pain with IUD insertion, but that's also one of the medications that's used in medical abortion. And so I have had to start writing on the prescription what I'm using it for, which I feel very conflicted about, because on the one hand, it's really nobody's business what I'm using it for, or the people in the pharmacy don't really need, I shouldn't need to do that. But I find I was finding if I didn't do that, I was having some trouble with certain pharmacies with them filling that. So certainly that's a lot of the fallout and unintended, well, those are the consequences of this type of legislation. So, it just kind of depends on where you are. I mean, I think that in the more metro areas, my guess would be that's a little bit less of a problem, but certainly I think in some of the outlying areas in Tennessee, I think, there might only be one pharmacy. And if there's a pharmacist that feels, concerned about that, that can really remove access. So we definitely have the biggest two are the methotrexate and the misoprostol, which is Cytotec.
Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
Mhm.
Can you think of other health consequences that people writing legislation who aren't physicians might run into creating without maybe not intending to, right?
Oh, I mean, lots. I mean, there are so many. Yeah, I mean, I think that this creates, I mean, it's a huge, talk about disparities in healthcare. I mean, this largely impacts lower socioeconomic bracket patients. I mean, there will always be a group of patients who can afford to go out of state and afford to do these things. And, to me, it's just another giant barrier. It's not it. And so it's so disproportionately impacts people. So I think that we're just furthering the divide between the haves and the have-nots here with this kind of healthcare. I think maternal health, I mean, the US is one of the worst, if not the worst westernized nation in terms of maternal mortality. This is certainly not going to improve that. Tennessee does not fare well in the country. There are a lot of women out there who have some very serious health issues that pregnancy is not good for them. And you know, this is sort of this one size fits all approach to a problem that very much is not one size fits all. So I think we're going to see more problems with maternal mortality. We're already starting to see, I would say delays in care for women who have infection, who have hemorrhage during pregnancy, but unfortunately still have a pregnancy with a heartbeat. Those delays in care result in increases in, morbidity and mortality, and we're already seeing that. There will be people that die as the consequence of this law, unfortunately. So, I mean, the tentacles of this go far out. It's not just about preventing an elective abortion. It's got very, very severe consequences for women's health.
Right. And just to back up your point about this disproportionately affects people at the lower end of the income scale. In 2014, 75% of abortions were with women below the federal poverty level of $15,730 a year for a family of two, or low income, which was 100 to 199% of that level. So we're talking very low income. That's where the majority of abortions happen, because lack of access to health care, preventive care, contraceptive care, et cetera, et cetera. And so then it's like this domino effect, right?
Well, and these also are women who are already coming to this pregnancy with a whole host of health issues as a result of lack of health care in the first place.
Right.
So, now it's just this double whammy for these women.
Right.
And while we're doing a little stigma busting, also statistically, most women who seek abortion care already have kids also. And so when you overlap that with the socioeconomic data, you're having those tentacle impacts on like members of families and generations of families that only contribute to those other health outcomes later in life, from like an ACEs perspective also.
Absolutely.
And the Turnaway study that I mentioned earlier, that you can find online anywhere, documents 5 years down the road additional financial consequences, health consequences, consequences for bonding with children, et cetera, as a result of being turned away from a desired abortion. So, so this problem perpetuates in the future. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions, or should we go ahead and turn off the recording and see if there are more questions then? I see Valerie nodding. Any other questions before we stop recording, or just information kinds of questions? Yes, ma'am, Michael.
This is such a broad question, but I'm wondering, what will it take for us to restore those original rights of Roe v. Wade? Is it merely a new governor, or is it the whole state representation and Supreme Court? I'm just wondering, what would it take?
Well, I I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, obviously moving a mountain comes to mind, but but I know that from the TMA, which is the Tennessee Medical Association, which is just doctors in Tennessee, there's a lot of the thought process is sort of step by step. So the first step is to try to get some exemptions written into this law, particularly rape, incest, so kind of taking care of those patients first, and trying to, it's definitely not going to work I don't think, to go in and just say, we need to change this whole thing. These are very, I even find we're going to have to compromise a little bit first on both sides. And I think the first step in that is to get some of these exemptions written, to get some better understanding of what's medically necessary, and at least try to get some of that back into the law first. I mean, I would love to go in and just, delete and, go back to where we were, but that's probably not going to happen. So I think advocacy is huge. I mean, I think that, figuring out who your representation is, drowning them in your opinion, having your colleagues drown them in your opinion, anything you can do, your professional associations, if they have lobbyists or advocacy there. I mean, politicians are all about numbers and votes. And so, the more you can kind of show strength in numbers, I think that's big. And also I think just educating, but also I think having some, and this may be a controversial thing for me to say, but I'm just going to say it, having some compassion for the people who feel so strongly on the other side. I don't think they want people to die. I don't think they want people to not have their medications. I don't think that was I like to think that that's not their intent, but I think that trying to understand what their perspective is and trying to help them understand what your personal perspective is, and understanding that maybe there has to be some middle ground on this issue. We have to think about people, and not just votes. But I try in my practice, when I come across those people who feel so strongly differently than I do, we all have different opinions. I mean, I think that, but some of that is, I try to explain, well, this is why I think this way, because I've seen this happen and this happen and this happen. And, but I think more to your point, how do we change this? I mean, we have to go through the channels we have are political, and trying to be as loud and strong of a voice as you can. I think politicians need real life examples. I mean, I contact mine and I give them, this is what I'm seeing. Here is what I saw in the gynecology ER in Nashville, Tennessee. Like, this is a result of this law that you have supported. I need you to know that this is what's happening to your constituents. Like, this is what's happening to your people. This is your hopefully unintended consequence of what you're doing here. But I think they need to hear from everyone, all of us. I mean, I think in the mental health space, I think they need to hear, here's what's happening. I mean, here's how this is impacting people.
That's a full and beautiful answer, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, Michael. And there's Kristina, in the quote in the chat, it says, "I'm so grateful you do that, Kristina. Thank you." So I agree. And I think we could all take that to heart. And just on a practical level in Tennessee, because this has now been enshrined not only in law, but in the Constitution, it's going to take quite a few steps to get anything changed in Tennessee. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means
Right.
realistically, we got to know what we're up against and
it's keep going. You know, it's going to be a long, hard battle to get back to where we were, and to not get frustrated and give up.
right. Right. So shall we,
I just wanted to comment one thing, and certainly not in disagreement at all. Yes, thank you, Kristina, for your wonderful response and beautiful response and for what you do. But I think, Michael, we're going to have to go through the Senate, the legislators. It's not just the governor and our Attorney General's office. I mean, they're, in my opinion, horrible. So we've got to get to them, however you do that. I'm not sure how you do that, but
yeah, which in Tennessee is challenging because they're not elected. The Attorney
exactly.
General is not elected, they're appointed by the Tennessee Supreme Court.
Yeah,
So
and they're
makes it complicated.
really going for the juggler. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. And again, doesn't mean we give up.
exactly.
Yep.
It doesn't
think
mean we don't listen to that other side and try to get them to hear
Yes.
what's true, what are hopefully the unintended consequences. But
Right.
I've seen discussions between people who are very polarized on each side, and it's some of the language that I think both sides use can be very off-putting. And it's hard to draw people closer to the middle with inflammatory
absolutely.
But and then on the advocacy part, I mean, I think so many different organizations in the provider space are trying to come up with how do we do this. It'd be great to collaborate. You know, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, TMA is all the doctors. There's a nurses, you know, there are, you know, you all, there's, you know, there's multiple different layers of providers. And I think that speaking to each other is really important, and trying, because again, it's all about numbers. You know, the more people we can get on board and pushing at the same time, the quicker the boulder rolls. So,
Right. So Melissa, how about we go ahead and turn off the recording at this point so that if there are questions or